Welcome back, boxing fans, to another great show with Sean on boxing for my daily box and walk talk. That's quite the mouthful. No diddy. So today we're going to be talking about the 135-pound lightweight division. Obviously one of the stacked divisions in boxing. It's funny because yesterday when I did a live, obviously shouting out Keyshawn for his dominant performance in becoming a world champion, people actually showed that they had some disinterest to the division overall. And you got to ask yourself, how can anyone dislike a division that potentially has 4 pound-for-pound quality fighters in it? Like, the depth of the division might not be as stacked as divisions like, say, 154 pounds or some other divisions. But when we talk about quality of athlete in the division, it's obviously one of the best divisions in American boxing, right? Currently the 140-pound division is kind of going through a transition. The 147-pound division has sort of stagnated, but there is obviously a shining light in the future towards it. The 154-pound division has always been a good division, but never has been a great division, has more been like a transitional division in the sport. And of course, the 160-pound weight class has been stagnant and virtually impossible to pay attention to. So then you get to 135, and with fighters right now, currently 4 world champions in Tank Davis, Shakur Stevenson, Vasily Lomachenko, and now Keyshawn Davis. And then with obviously very good contenders in the division as well. Obviously Frank Martin moved to 140, so that's good for him. I'll be intrigued to see what he's able to do at the 140-pound division. There's definitely opportunities for him there, especially through the WBA, which has always been prone to support the PBC, and obviously has a few fighters that he could easily match up with in that division, which would make some really intriguing matchups. But at 135, when you got guys like Muratila, who's obviously a highly ranked fighter right now, currently part of Top Rank's stable, so potential fights with either Keyshawn or Vasily Lomachenko are no-brainers. That's an obvious fight that we could easily look forward to one of those two guys defending their world titles against, and a solid opponent. Then of course you have Zepeda, who it looked as if he was going to be fighting Shakur Stevenson, and that would have been a fantastic fight. I would like to see him against any of the champions actually in the division. I kind of think that Golden Boy dropped the ball by not having him fight Dennis Branchek to become the WBO world champion. Obviously that would have put him in a good position to get paid more money as a world champion. Then you could have potentially fought unification fights against whoever, and obviously you would have made more money in negotiations because you did have a title. So I don't really know what Oscar De La Hoya and his team were thinking by not pushing that. He was the #1 mandated opponent in all 4 sanctioning bodies. So it seems to be a no-brainer that you would go in that direction. And obviously a fight with Dennis Branchek is far easier than any of the potential champions he would have been facing. But who am I? I'm just a boxing fan. Who knows what they're thinking as far as his career. Sorry about the noise on a major street, so I'll talk a little louder. But let's just talk about the champions, and then we'll talk about what we can expect over the next few years, 2025, 2026. Obviously with boxing, you can't really look past that because you never know how things are going to pan out. Things could be virtually 180 degrees in a span of a year. You look at the 140-pound division, which was talked about as being one of the deepest, most competitive fight divisions in boxing, and now, you know, basically it's a division that hardly anyone's really paying too much attention to. But currently, and I'll break this down in order of fighters that I think where they're ranked. So Tank Davis, obviously I think he's considered the #1 fighter in the division, even though he's never beaten a 135-pound world champion since he's been in the division. and pretty much picked and chose his way through the division, pulling fighters up in weight. This is not hate towards Tank Davis. This is just fact. You know, it's funny that when you point out fact, somehow people get in their feelings. Tank Davis is currently in his second weight division. He's a 2-weight world champion. Obviously, he's one of the most dynamic fighters and exciting fighters in the sport of boxing. That's why people do have high expectations for him, because they want to see him up against the best competition in boxing, just like we do with every other top fighter in the sport. And the fans' aggravation is the fact that there's always a ton of excuses, whether it was him being protected by Floyd Mayweather, or now being protected by the PBC, or just protected by YouTube channels. The reality of the situation is, don't you want to see Tank prove himself against the best competition in the sport? I'll leave that out there for you. But as far as Tank himself, we can't deny that, like Golovkin and Deontay Wilder and other power punchers that came before him, he is very exciting to watch. You never know how a fight's going to end, but you do know that it potentially is going to end with one punch, which obviously makes his fights very exciting. That was the same thing with Wilder, the same thing with Golovkin, right? And for Tank Davis, it's no different. But just like people wanted to see Wilder and Golovkin eventually step up their level of competition, they also want to see Tank Davis do the same thing. Then we get to number 2, and right now I think that's probably Shakur Stevenson, who is currently a 3-weight world champion, obviously was unified at 130 pounds. When we look at his 130-pound reign, that's obviously where he really proved himself. First by beating champion Jamal Herring, and then unifying against Oscar Valdez. Obviously at 126 pounds and 135 pounds, he won titles that were vacant. He didn't beat world champions to earn those 2 belts, but it is what it is. There's a lot of vacant titles available, and obviously promotional teams and boxers teams are going to move them in the best method possible to build their careers, and obviously give them more hardware to market them through. So right now, currently, he is one of the most skilled fighters in boxing. The thing that he lacks, unlike Tank Davis, is that excitement. He's been described as boring, and a lot of that is because of him. He talks a great game, but unfortunately, when he steps into the ring, he's often disappointed in his performances, not really putting his foot down on the pedal and actually getting wins that people thought were exciting. I thought his first fight at 135 was a fantastic victory against the Japanese fighter, but then after that, he went on to have 2 less than stellar performances. Obviously got injured and has been a little inactive lately, which doesn't help build him up anymore. And obviously the fact that Zepeda's team looks like they are trying to duck him right now, there's a great potential opponent stylistically that you think potentially could make Shakur look great. So it's disappointing that potentially that fight is not going to happen. So 2025 is obviously a year where we want to see him step up, and we want to see him against great competition to see how good he can be when he fights really high-level opponents. Because right now, the best opponent you could say that he's fought in his career was Oscar Valdez. And nobody ever said that Oscar Valdez was a pound-for-pound quality fighter. So, you know, in 2025, I think the pressure is on him to actually fight somebody and to prove that, you know, he is the elite fighter that we all think he is. Then at number 3, you have Vasily Lomachenko. Who knows how much longer Vasily is going to be in the sport of boxing. After his loss to Devin Haney, we know that we heard speculation that he was going to retire after that. Obviously, that was a very disappointing blow to end up not becoming undisputed, something that obviously he geared his whole professional career towards, only to lose a very close fight, a fight that the majority of pundits and boxing fans felt he did edge out and he deserved to win. But obviously, boxing is boxing. You know, if you can't close it and you can't do it significantly, then there's always the opportunity that you may not get the win, and that's what happened. So, because of his father, he did come back, win a world title to become a 2-time lightweight champion, and obviously is in conversation to fight the other top guys in the division, even though out of everyone in this division, he's the only one who actually has done any of that. His resume at 135 is leaps and bounds above Tank Davis and Shakur Stevens. It's not even comparable at this point. But he's also 38 years old. Obviously a fighter who's getting up there in age. So the question is, physically and mentally, how motivated is he to continue to fight elite top-level fighters in the sport of boxing? We will see moving into 2025. Then, of course, we get to the young man on the block, Keyshawn Davis. I would say right now, on the outside looking in, the guy with the most potential to go on to do the most in the sport of boxing, I think, is Keyshawn Davis. Obviously, Lomachenko is close to retirement. Shakur and Tank Davis should both have long careers left in them, but both of them have weaknesses. Tank Davis obviously is very small and diminutive. The fact that he is more of a counter puncher than an aggressive come forward fighter means that he can be outworked and lose rounds. And we've seen that consistently through his career. Kind of the same problem that Deontay Wilder had, relying too much on his power, which is one reason why I always respected Golovkin more than either one of those two fighters, because Golovkin, even if he relied on his power, used his boxing skills to win rounds, stay busy, and continue to be a threat. Kind of like what we see with Better Biev currently. Golovkin did have one of the best jabs in boxing and was able to win fights primarily with his jab when his power wasn't able to land later on in his career when he got older. Unfortunately for Wilder, he wasn't able to rely on his jab to find that success. And for Tank Davis, being a short fighter, the chances are that eventually this is going to be an issue with him as well. If you can't win close rounds by being more active or controlling distance with your jab and always relying on your power, inevitably you're going to lose fights that are close when you're in with a tough opponent, a guy that actually comes to fight and is tough enough to deal with your power or take it away. But obviously Tank is explosive. He is the mini Mike Tyson. But even Mike Tyson lost to the great boxer with a great jab back in the day. Then, of course, you have Shakur. And Shakur is the new revolution of Floyd Mayweather. The difference is Floyd was also a great puncher, was very long-armed, which made it easy for him to compete with taller fighters because he could always establish his jab when necessary. For Keyshawn, he doesn't have the longest reach, so moving up in weight classes potentially may be a problem in the future for him. We will see how it goes moving forward. Lomachenko obviously is getting near the end of the road. It doesn't seem as if he's that motivated any longer. Obviously, he's went through a real tough patch with the whole Ukrainian war, which really sort of sidetracked his career for a while. And then obviously losing a fight that he felt he deserved to win to reach his ultimate goal, which mentally kind of soured boxing towards him. So you can understand that he would be closer to retirement than actually doing anything significant in the sport. It just is what it is. I mean, people that are going to hate on Lomachenko for being close to retirement, but then think that it's okay for Tank Davis to talk about retirement. Shake your head. I mean, Tank Davis hasn't even done close to what Lomachenko has in his career, and he's literally 8 years younger. So you can understand why one guy would think about retirement. The other guy should be thinking about cementing his legacy, right? Then, of course, we get to Keyshawn. And Keyshawn, I heard all the people trying to talk about him being a weight bully and using that kind of stuff against him. I talked about this before. Keyshawn is not a naturally thick type of dude, right? He's very thin. So being at this weight but being tall and long is not a problem for him, because he's not a guy who's going to put on a lot of muscle through his thighs and through his back and upper chest, unlike other fighters, right, who may be tall and long but just naturally are thicker and wider. Obviously, I do think he's going to be able to transition through 140 and potentially 147 when the time is right. But right now, he's currently a champion at 135. Why would we talk about him moving to 140 when there's bigger and better opponents, obviously at 135 pounds? If Top Rank can get him a Lomachenko fight, that would be huge, and would be sort of the passing of the guard type of passing of the torch situation, right? Which of course Crawford wanted with Manny, and people consistently always want that. We don't know if Lomachenko is going to be down with it, but you could see that this is a possibility just based on the fact that they are with the same promotional team. We know he's not interested in fighting Shakur Stevenson, and people are getting in their feelings and pushing narratives regarding that. But the truth is, there's other opponents for him to fight. So whether he's going to fight Shakur right now, that doesn't take away the other opponents that are actually in the division that would make potentially superstar fights. And obviously the main guy for that is Tank Davis, who is the biggest pay-per-view star out of all of them. A Keyshawn Davis-Tank Davis fight is huge, stylistically super intriguing, and a great matchup. And I think that Keyshawn has all the tools in his bag to beat a Tank Davis. But obviously Tank Davis is the older fighter, more experienced, and very dangerous. The biggest problem we have here is currently one fighter is on his way out. Two other fighters look like they're not interested in fighting. And then the main guy in the division looks like he's willing just to cherry pick his whole career. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of boxing fans aren't that interested in the 135 pound division, which is definitely disappointing, because it is a great division with great elite boxers in it. And as a boxing fan, all we want to do is see these guys match up against each other to see who truly is the best, right? Just like we do in any division. My dream or hope going into 2025 would be that Shakur fights Tank Davis, and that somehow Turki Al-Sheikh is able to make that fight, and you can do it in the States, and we can get Tank Davis to fucking sign up and actually take on a legacy opponent, and that Lomachenko doesn't retire, and we get to see him in with young up-and-comer Keyshawn Davis in a huge unification. And then the winners can then match up for undisputed at lightweight. Obviously, if Turki Al-Sheikh is behind it and the deep pockets he has, it becomes far more likely that that is something that we could see. Of course, that depends on the PBC and Tank Davis, who are sort of the outliers and don't really look like they're too interested in working with Turki Al-Sheikh and giving boxing fans what they want. But we will see. We will cross our fingers and we will hope. But at the end of the day, I mean, these guys are far too talented, far too good not to match up against one another in some formation, whatever that may be. But we'll see. Let me know in the comment section below. What do you think about the current lightweight division? What matchups would you most like to see, and why?